Hey guys, welcome to Rihanna's Lens, where I interact with you about the components in the STEM field and introduce you to fascinating people who passionately inhabit the scientific and technical frontiers of our society. My name is Rihanna Malhotra, and I'm absolutely elated to share this podcast with all of you. On this episode, I'm joined by a guest who's the only Hungarian female engineering student at Virginia Tech. She's an international student from Budapest studying Aerospace Engineering. She's also a member and mentor of the New York Academy of Sciences. She runs her own blog. One of her greatest passions is representing females in the STEM fields and promoting science to younger audiences. She's determined to show that you can be something you have never even seen before, even if you're wearing heels. I'm so glad to welcome and introduce Eszti Varga. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to begin our discussion.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Aerospace engineering is one field that will never fail to amaze me. So let me begin by asking you, what exactly is it that motivated you to get into this field?
So it's a little difficult to answer. I often mention that aerospace engineering doesn't even actually have a translation in Hungarian. So whenever I have to kind of explain what I study or what I'm trying to become, it's a little, I guess, funny. You can kind of translate it to space engineering, but aerospace engineering is obviously a lot more than just that. So it's definitely a little funny, and you can definitely tell that I've never seen anybody like this growing up. It's not something I could have studied here. I've never met an aerospace engineer until going to college, so it definitely wasn't a predetermined path, I guess. Until I was about 15, 16, I wanted to be a writer, so even the whole science path wasn't really gonna be my thing. Not only was I not really into science, I genuinely hated my science classes. So I was actually one of those kids where, if we would have physics or chemistry, I would be definitely disappointed. I would be nervous. I wasn't going to be happy that we would have to go to that class, but obviously a lot has changed. So I was more into literature and things like that until I went to code. So there's this nonprofit organization called School. And I was quite bored, technically, which is the only reason I signed up for that workshop. And I went, and that was on a Tuesday. And then by the time it was Thursday, I written my first game. It was really, really bad version of a wall pong game, but I guess you can kind of see that it really did turn a path, and it was kind of meant to be in that sense. I still see engineering and all that sort of stuff as a form of art. It's just more of creating with technology, which I think is really, really amazing. The whole space thing came a lot later. So a few years after that, I was already pretty involved with coding, and I was teaching kids how to code, and even adults actually, which was a little interesting at that age. But I was doing things like that, and I thought I was going to be, maybe a software engineer or computer scientist or something like that. So I didn't really think about all that sort of stuff. And then I realized that, that would mostly entail just sitting in front of a computer all day. And I realized that I would probably go insane doing that. I really like doing the hands-on stuff that comes with engineering. So I also work at a lab currently, which is kind of like a workshop lab. And even my current internship, I do a lot of the building and, the actually getting to, I guess, touch things and feel like you're making something kind of stuff. So I really started liking that idea of going maybe into, mechatronics or something like that, because I really like the idea of robots and all that. That was until I saw a movie. It was a documentary about the Higgs boson, which I know very unrelated to this whole thing, but there they mentioned the multiverse theory. And as someone who grew up watching Marvel, Star Trek movies and, the whole craziness of all that, I loved the idea that that is something that, has a potential reality behind it. So I started really researching that theory. And then I guess I just kind of happened upon aerospace engineering, and I didn't technically happen upon in particular aerospace engineering. that wasn't even until I was applying to college in the US, because I thought, let's get a degree in like mechanical engineering or mechatronics or something like that. And then, with that like degree, I'm going to go and work at one of the space companies because, well, I don't think I really have to explain why it's so cool to work on space stuff. And that like one day I was just applying to universities in the US, and obviously as an international student, you don't really get to like, I never went to any of these schools. I never looked at what they were going to look like. I never got to, really like research it in that sense other than Googling stuff. And there I saw aerospace engineering on one of their websites, and I guess I was like immediately sold with that whole love for space and then like engineering. And, when they tell you that you can do the things at the same time that you just really, really love, it's pretty damn cool. So that's kind of the story of how I found aerospace engineering.
It's honestly so inspirational that you transitioned from not liking science at all, but after you attended one workshop and you watched some Star Wars movies, you immediately got that interest and you followed your dreams ever since you were a kid.
Yeah, so I guess it really shows this part of the whole women in STEM aspect, that it's most often not the fact that girls or women wouldn't want to take those paths. It's that even if I was lucky, I cannot say that my parents ever told me that I couldn't be one of those things or that I shouldn't do them, or if I wanted to play with like army toys or like cars, I could obviously do them. It's just more like a path like that is never really presented to you. So Hungary has the lowest numbers of females in STEM and engineering, so it's not like the environment for me was ever about taking that sort of path. So it's actually something that has become really important to me, as you mentioned in the intro. So I do a lot of work related to getting more girls and females into STEM because, as I said, it's most often not the fact that they are not interested in it or that they wouldn't be amazing at it or that they can't do it. It's just that we never present them with these paths because most of their family members are unlikely, sadly, to be engineers on the female side. And even if the male side is, when you go to school and you're like maybe 12 or 13, it's not popular to be into the boy stuff when you're a girl. So I used to play video games at that age, and I clearly to this day remember that, that was kind of like a weird thing that was like looked upon a little bit like, why is she doing that? And I stopped doing that too. It's only now that I've started gaming again because I obviously now know that it's not like a bad thing. And even at that point, it's not like I ever thought of it as a bad thing. It's more just that I kind of thought it, that I wasn't meant to be doing it because that's what kind of society is telling you. So it's obviously something that needs to have a lot of work done about it. But the first step is definitely just showing girls that they can obviously do it. Just like how I was shown that, I can code something and it's actually an amazing feeling. So.
Yeah, and it's also so inspiring that you broke those stereotypes and you continue to do what you really dreamt of. And speaking of which, since you spoke about there being very less people and very less women, in fact, in the STEM fields, how were there any challenges that you faced being a Hungarian and a woman in your field?
So, as I mentioned, it's not really a popular option in my country, which is very sad. And, I'm never happy. Well, a lot of people think that it's really nice for me to say that I'm the only one at BT, which is one of the biggest universities in the world. But in fact, one day I would love to start an interview by being like, guess what? I'm no more the only one. I know like this person and she's there and she's doing it and she's amazing. Like, I wish I wasn't so alone in my path. And, I obviously it's nice to recognize that, I'm doing something that is hopefully paving a path for future generations, just by at least, showing them that they're capable of something like this. But it's not nice. So yeah, there were a lot of challenges when I was about 15, 16. I told my math teacher in high school that I wanted to be, I wanted to do this whole programming thing because it's so much fun. It's so great. And he looked me straight in the eye and just told me that, yeah, you're doing it because you want to, marry well. Which, at that age, you don't really know how to react at that age. It was definitely one of my like first interactions with such, well, not nice things to say to young girls and things you shouldn't be saying to young girls at all or ever to anyone, because, just because you're doing a career, it is obviously unrelated to your personal life. And I didn't want to do that because I wanted to be, married. I was doing it because I loved it. And there were a lot of instances like that. Like when I say it's not a popular option from Hungary to go to the US, I mean that when I was telling people in my high school, they were pretty much laughing in my face that, yeah, sure, you're gonna study in the US. Yeah, we'll see about that. And it's still sometimes things like that with little things that people say that we call microaggressions. Obviously, that's very common, sadly. But there's also other challenges. So even by going to the US, obviously not everything is perfect there either. It's not like, you go to a perfect world and everything is suddenly fixed. There's still issues there. So with Zoom University, you obviously had the whole, people talking over you, you having a really hard time to say something. So it's definitely something that isn't a choice to learn how to deal with. It's something that you have to learn how to deal with. It's not something that, if you're up for it, you should, or if you feel like you're brave enough to deal with that, just stand up to other people. As a female in STEM, it's not really an option because, well, I mean, I wish it was. I wish I could tell an introverted person that, yeah, it's going to be fine. You'll have your challenges, but you'll find your own ways of dealing with it. Because if you're a female in STEM and you don't learn the ways to stand up for yourself and to advocate for others as well, which is something really important, or you don't learn how to, even just react to these situations, because obviously it's not something that you just, learn growing up. Like right now, of course, at this age and with these many experiences, I would have known what to say to that teacher, but obviously I was a kid at that time. I did not know at all what to even say. Maybe I laughed because I just felt awkward and bad about it. But the fact that it has stuck with me for so long obviously says a lot, because it was, even if you say things to other people, it might not be a big deal to you, but it can be something really formative for them, especially at that age. So it has definitely been challenging. I definitely don't want to close on that note, though. It's definitely getting better. I would definitely say so, or at least I'm finally, finding people that are in the same sort of situation as I am, which I find to be one of the best things about being females in STEM is that 98% of the time, the females you're going to meet in industry or in any of the, research fields or any of that as a female, they're going to be there to root for you. They cannot wait to talk to you about situations like this. They advocate for you. So when situations like this come up, it's not only you who's responding, but them stepping up for your rights, of being recognized, of being respected, of, not having you be questioned for the simple fact that you're a female. And so I would say that it's getting better. It definitely still will take a lot of work from a lot of people, especially with younger generations. But, I do love the fact that now I can turn on TV and then I see at least a few TV ads that are not just about Barbies, but, Barbies as astronauts and, showing girls that they can be anything they dream to be, just like boys. So.
Right, I completely agree. And you know what, Eszti, now that you're studying aerospace engineering, you proved all those high school bullies wrong. Now that you're in US and you're studying and you're following your path, I think you finally accomplished yourself. There was no need to reply to those bullies back when you were younger. I think you proved them wrong and broke your boundaries now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely feels great. I can't say that currently I'm home and, there's few funny instances because I do a lot of interviews and I do a lot of STEM communication and, just representation in general. So it's something that I've kind of taken on as a side job. And at this point, actually, even as a paid job that I go and talk about, all of these amazing things. And I'm obviously very blessed to be working with this too, because I'm very passionate about it. But there have been a few funny instances where I've had, people from back when I was younger who would reach out to me and they're like, hey, can you help me? Or, hey, I'm working with this university. Can you come and give a talk to us? And there's definitely a few moments where I just kind of smile to myself and I'm like, yeah, things have changed, haven't they? But it's still not good that I've had to experience any of these. And, at the end of the day, none of the things I do are about obviously proving those people wrong. I just feel genuinely bad for them. And it's more about that I feel bad for future generations that they would have to experience that, because I wasn't discouraged by these comments, or even if I was, it wasn't obviously for a longer time, or it's not something that has, taken me off this path. But if you just simply think about how many kids have been told these things and how many of them have probably given up on paths like this because of this, it's really, really disappointing and sad. And it just makes you question a lot of things, because it's just so, not okay to approach the world by thinking that, just because of your gender, you're incapable of a job. And this also goes for, male nurses, or, any of the fields that males are not represented in. It's just that we need to start showing people that they can do anything. And I believe it's our human responsibility to react when people tell us these things, not saying things like, oh, you don't look like you're doing that thing. Or, wow, like, I'm so surprised, like you're full of surprises. No, it's, even if it's a surprise, it's not, a negative thing. It should be a positive thing for everyone. So I believe that it's up to all of us to start doing these things and not have to tell kids that, yeah, one day you can prove them wrong, because they shouldn't have to. They can just, do what makes them happy and prove it for themselves that, yeah, I wanted to do this thing and I did this thing.
Right. In fact, no child or anyone in general should be told that you can't do something. That's why it's so important for more women or anyone in general, more diversity to be shown in STEM, so that young kids can look up to them and know, oh, that this girl is in STEM, so I can do the same as well. So I think it's so important. And even advertisements, as you said before, that now they're showing Barbies that are part of going to space explorations and those advertisements. So I think that's a really great move, and more kids will be inspired to see this. So I know that you're really passionate about aerospace engineering. So what's the coolest thing that you've made as an aerospace engineer student?
So I guess one of them is not something I made, but I'll talk about that as the second thing. So in the US mainly, we have these things called design teams at universities. With design teams, it's kind of like applying what you're studying to real life, which is really, really cool, because obviously with most STEM degrees, it's not, you don't really have the time to build a rocket next to classes or something like that. So there's design teams where, it's student made up teams, and you mainly participate in different competitions. So I'm part of Design Build Fly, and Design Build Fly is AIAA's biggest competition in the world for building RC planes, which is really cool, because every year there's like different aspects to this huge challenge, and you have to build an entire like RC plane, which sure isn't mainly like huge, but it comes with a lot of the challenges and building it, designing it, building the CAD model, working out the electronics, there's sensors, flying the whole thing. It's really, really exciting. So that's probably the coolest thing I've ever made. Like, like just seeing tiny pieces of wood, and like you're sanding them down every day, and then one day that thing becomes an actual plane and you can fly it and you can see it fly. It's an amazing feeling. At least for me, it definitely was. So that's one of the coolest things I've ever participated in building. As I mentioned, I also work at a workshop kind of lab. It's an engineering lab. So there I do a lot of, as I said, like the hands-on work. So from 3D printing to laser cutting to sawing things to gluing, to like actually building things. So there I make a lot of things. My favorite one is definitely the laser cutter. I'm kind of like the go-to at the lab with that tool. So I built a lot of things actually. Like I make earrings with laser cutters that are like, with a lot of things that I come up with. I built a whole like buildable car set that's laser cut, so it's 2D, and then you can pick out the little wood pieces, and they are all numbered, and you can build this whole like car and caravan set that like kind of drags it. So that's also something really cool that I made. And then the other thing that I said isn't really something technically that I made, but is the best thing that I've ever experienced related to aero. was when I got to walk into our wind turbine. So VT has a wind turbine that used to be NASA's old wind turbine, and we are the only ones in the world who have something like that. So I got to visit it, and it was definitely a moment of, just, I don't know, experiencing your passion and like having a moment of, wow, I did this kind of feeling. Because, I never in a million years would have imagined a few years ago that I would be, in a place like that, knowing that one day I can work on something like that or research it or any of that sort of stuff. And it was definitely quite emotional too, just thinking about, how, as I said, although sadly I'm the only one, I am doing something that I've never seen anyone do. So it's definitely a bit of a pressure there, but it's definitely amazing too. So I just wanted to kind of mention that it's not something I built, but it's definitely amazing to walk into wind turbine. I don't think I'm ever gonna get over that.
Yeah, all of these things that you mentioned sound so fascinating. I feel like I want to experience these things too. And like you said, that when you're building stuff and seeing it come to life, that must feel so good.
Yeah, it definitely does.
And as an aerospace engineer, what do you usually work on? Like what products, especially?
So when you say aerospace engineering, I guess it's a very big misconception about our field that it's very narrow. Like I've had so many interview questions about people. That's kind of the point of the interview when I can usually tell when people look at me and they're like, your field is very narrow, that I'm like, yeah, you have not looked into my field for 2 minutes probably, because even if you just Google aerospace engineering, you're going to realize that aerospace engineers do a lot. So aerospace engineering, obviously entitled the engineering of aeronautical and, so devices like airplanes and gliders and, helicopters and all that sort of stuff. But it also entitles everything that's space. So obviously rockets, propulsion, but also navigation devices and, little rovers or but then also on the navigation side, it includes everything that's, makes up the GPS systems. It makes up, satellites and, all that sort of stuff going on. And then a fun fact is that we actually have a lot of our classes in common with ocean engineers. So I have analyzed ship structures too, which is something I guess you wouldn't really think of, but at the end of the day, it uses the same sort of things. So one of the ways to like really explain what aerospace engineers do, or can do at least, is that they look at everything that moves through matter. So even if that's air or, outer space or deep oceans, it's all kind of, somehow related. But even if you just think about these things, there are still like so, like tiny parts in it. So there's even things like plasma science. There's things like obviously rockets, but then, those have boosters. You have a multitude of different types of things that fly, even just here on Earth. So you have FTOLs, which are, anything that goes from ground up. So like flying taxis and making those things up. But then also, as I mentioned, gliders, big planes, small planes, there's a lot of variety in that, different type of helicopters. I can probably go on for hours just by listing these things, but it's also, when you break it down, as I said, to just small things. So looking at the structure analysis of those things, looking at fluid dynamics. Fluid dynamics is used pretty much everywhere in engineering field and even in non-engineering fields, because analyzing flow, and all that sort of stuff is very, very useful. And we use it in a lot of fields. But then also we learn about systems. So you can do systems engineering. There's just honestly so much you can do. You can probably even go down a math path, because as aerospace engineers, you have to study a lot of math. So we take one of the most amount of math classes out of any engineering majors, because obviously they don't just say it's rocket science, because yes, it actually is, but it is quite complicated at the same time. I'm not saying it's like undoable. God, no, never. It's just kind of like you get there one day, like I did, and then you realize, so you really don't have to be a genius to do all of this, which I think is one of the moments a lot of people experience in STEM, which is obviously sadly really tied to imposter syndrome too, because you start doubting yourself because you feel like, you're not enough or this or that. But hopefully you also have a moment where you're just kind of standing there where you've done something really great and you're like, I'm really not a genius, but I worked hard. I work with other people, because obviously engineering is a team sport at the end of the day. You're not going to get to engineering university, education, or even work life without other people that you work with. It is a team sport. So, it's just all of those sort of things going on. So yeah, aerospace engineers can do a lot of stuff. Even just engineers in general. So I technically currently don't have like a strictly aero related internship. I'm doing more of a mechanical manufacturing kind of side, which is still a little related to aero, but in general, I'm doing a lot of things that I wouldn't be doing if you just look at the general definition of an aerospace engineer. But I'm still very capable of doing those sort of things, because once you know 3D design, or some basics of coding, like I've coded a lot. There's so many different things you can do. I can't even start listing them. Even if you just Google them, you're probably gonna find like 150,000 list of things you can be, things you can do with that sort of skills. Because the main thing about getting a STEM education is that when you end up with a job, by the time you finish university, you'll probably know, especially with internship, is that yes, you've learned a lot, you know a lot, but you mainly just learn to learn and study and adapt. Because you're going to get to, especially if we're talking about industry, you're going to get to a company and then you're going to relearn everything, because they use specific softwares. They have their own systems. They have their own, ways that projects go, ways that they are thinking. They have so many applied like flow ideas. So there's things like, lean, and then you have scrum masters. There's like so many ideas out in the world. And at the end of the day, you're just going to get there and you're going to learn on the job, which sounds a little funny as an engineer or anyone in STEM, but obviously you're not going to learn there how to do like the basics of CAD. You did that in school, or you're, not going to write your like first hello world at your job probably. But you just go with the basics, and sure, you've learned a lot, and you learn a lot in university, but at the end of the day, you just learn how to learn quickly, how to adapt to difficult situations. And the main thing is that you've learned how to solve problems. So anything that's STEM or engineering, especially engineering, at the end of the day is solving problems. So I go to my internship every day, and that's kind of the same thing for other engineers too. And I'm currently working on solving a problem. Maybe it's creating a new product, or maybe it's something that we just need at the factory because there's this issue, or maybe we could improve productivity, so let's come up with something that does that. So it's a lot of that. And at the end of the day, solving problems, there isn't just a single way to solve problems. So the best applicable way to explain this is with coding, is that when you're writing a code, there's about a million ways you can do it. Because you can approach problems and ideas in a billion different ways. So that actually pinpoints why it's so amazing to work with a diverse community, because I'll have very different ideas at work on solving problems as an aerospace engineer than someone that I'm working with who's maybe a mechanical engineer. Because at the end of the day, we study kind of different things, and maybe I'm going to relate something that's aero related, or maybe like plane structure related, where they are going to come up with a specific idea that different jigs can be made or something like that. So it's definitely really important to recognize that as an engineer you can do everything. In fact, according to research, and this is one of my favorite facts about engineering, is that engineering degrees are the least regretted degrees, because anyone who gets an engineering degree has worked so hard and they've learned to learn so much that even, if they didn't end up working in even a STEM field, they go on to do and work at amazing jobs that they really like, because they are really good at adapting, learning new things, solving problems. So.
Right. And engineering as a whole is so vast and branched around so many fields. And frankly speaking, everything that we're using right now is built by engineers. Even the code inside computers is basically built by engineers. And like you said, diversity is so important. You can share ideas. And I think being your authentic self is the most important thing you can bring on the table. So you go, Esther.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really important because, different people have different ideas, and different ideas meet for better solutions. I don't think it's really a complicated idea to grasp or understand, because if you think about it realistically, if you have the same type of people who think the same way, you're just going to come up with one solution that maybe could be done differently or could be improved, or maybe there's just two ways to solve this problem, and maybe you should apply both and see which one works better. Because it's not really about saying that one idea is better than the other. It's more just about a lot of the times it's more just about trying them and seeing which one works in this particular situation. So you definitely need to work and understand and let people be their authentic self, as you said. We need to be welcoming, and we need to be happy that other people have other ideas. So I definitely like it this way. And as you said, engineering is crazy vast, especially if you go to kind of like a technical STEM related university like I do. We have about, I don't even know, 15, 20 maybe different engineering majors. I can't even list all of them to you, and they are different enough that we have different educations for them, which I think says quite a lot. But yeah, at the end of the day, engineers have the same basics, so that also allows us to make for more diverse workspaces. Because as I said, I work with people who are not aerospace engineers at all, especially that I'm doing my internship here in Hungary, where you can't even learn that. So obviously, I don't really work with aerospace engineers here. But it makes for great teams that you have different engineers, you have different people from different kind of backgrounds. So we need to be happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, everyone sees things differently and everyone has different views about a new experiment that you look into. And also, you mentioned that you did some internships in the past and are still doing some internships. So, what exactly was your educational journey? Were you always interested in aerospace engineering, or did you do some internship in some other field at first?
So this is my first internship. I should definitely mention that being an international student in Aero is not an easy job. It's not an impossible one, but it's definitely not too easy, because most of the things and most of the jobs are regulated by ITAR or other legalities that keep you from being able to work that job. Because as I like to easily explain this situation, rockets are weapons. And that's not really a complicated idea to understand. So as a foreign national, I can't really apply for a lot of the jobs. Like I cannot work at NASA. I can apply for an internship at NASA because I'm not American. So there have been a lot of, figuring that sort of stuff out. So I am doing my current internship with GE Power. I can't say a lot about it. I guess that comes from a lot of the confidential things. Like even when I was vaguely saying what I do, it's mainly problem solving, designing things, making the drawings, coming up with solutions, doing measurements. I can like very vaguely talk about what I do on a day-to-day basis. But it's definitely hasn't been easy. I can say it has been, especially emotionally, because a lot of the people, and even companies where they do hire internationals from time to time, it is not a common occasion. But when they do, some recruiters will not be aware of that. And a lot of the recruiters are really bad with handling the whole situation of having international students come up to them. Even some of the professors and, a lot of the scientific communities sometimes, well, thankfully not the whole, but a tiny part of the scientific community and the engineering community and all that is not the best about international students, because everyone has their own thoughts at the end of the day in the world, and you can't do much about that. So a lot of the companies cannot hire internationals. Some of them can, but then even oftentimes people are misinformed, and then they tell international students that they can't when they could. So it's definitely complicated. I cannot say I have figured the whole thing out. I actually don't know a single international student who has figured the whole thing out. But it does make for a great community. So if you're an international student listening to this, you should definitely follow Vicky Roy. She is studying to be an aerospace engineer. She studies at Georgia Tech. She's doing her master's. I don't even know her personally, but she does amazing work, especially online, on talking about international students, especially in Aero and their internships and the things you can do with that. So I do have an internship right now. As I said, it's my first industry-sided internship. So it's not really a big secret, but I love science. So I do plan on, continuing my education and not going straight into industry and working in industry when I finish my bachelor's. So this is my first industry internship. Before that, I've done about 3 different researches. So my very last one was my entirely own project, mainly centered around solving complicated differential equations, to put it nicely, solving a lot of math with a lot of software to model blood flow and look at different alterations in veins and things like that. So that's actually a really fun fact about aerospace engineers. We study about flow and all Navier-Stokes and all that sort of stuff, which you can relate to biology with blood flow, which is very important in medical fields. So there's another interesting thing you can do as an aerospace engineer. Before that, I used to work on GPS and other types of navigation devices. That was my summer internship last summer. That was a research internship. And then before that, I kind of took like a research themed class, if that makes any sense. So that was aero themed. It was mainly focusing on how you can do research in aero and some of the research stuff within aero. So that's kind of all the research I've done. I mean, I've done research even before that. So as you mentioned, I am one of the youngest members of the New York Academy of Sciences, and I'm a mentor there too. But before that, I used to be a mentee there. So I have won one of the Academy's competitions, which was a research competition. And then I've done research for the first time probably when I was around 17, or maybe even before that. So I've definitely always loved research, and I have a lot of experience with research, which, to answer your question, has helped me decide, or at least kind of narrow down what I would like to do within aero and like aero itself as well. I still can say that I have decided, which makes me a little nervous because it's becoming very close that I have to choose kind of like my focus within aero. But good thing, it's not the end of the day if I choose something that I figure, I'm gonna like something else after that, because then I can do my master's maybe on that different thing. So we should definitely mention that it's not a bad thing to realize that, something that at a point made you happy, there's a new thing that makes you happy, you should go do that thing. We don't choose careers for the end of our lives, especially in STEM, where what I study right now will be absolutely different probably by the time I get to industry. That's mainly too bad. Every STEM field, it develops way too quickly for any education to follow that. And just in general, we all, especially our generations, will be taking a lot of jobs that don't even exist yet. So we shouldn't be worried about any of that. Just do what makes you happy at the moment and follow the path that you feel like you should be doing, and don't be afraid to change any of that. So yeah, I can't say that I have technically chosen what I want to do. I'm really in between mainly design, so aerospace structure design, which is kind of like plane design, but also rockets and all that sort of stuff, or space engineering. So I don't think I really have to explain why either of them I found amazing. We have a lot of alumni who are astronauts, so I don't often have to explain why my field is amazing. Let's be honest about that. So it has definitely helped me. I have done a multitude of things, as you can tell, even just by talking about my research fields. So there's, multidisciplinarity with my most recent one, which was math and biology and aero and flow. So that's a mix. Before that, it was navigation and, GPS and INS and sensors and all that sort of stuff. And then before that, it was, just planes, and we like planes, to put it a little funny, I guess. And then right now I'm working, with gas turbines, which is, something new again. I'm definitely one of those people that I just like to try everything if I can. And, I can't say that there's any of them that I haven't enjoyed. I've learned so much from all of them. I've, picked up things from each of them that I've used on the next one, which definitely makes choosing a lot harder, to be honest. But yeah, all of the things that you get to do within STEM will shape you in another way or form, even if you realize that you're, at a company or an internship that you might like to do in the future, you're going to pick up a lot of useful skills. And, at least you have something to cross off that really lengthy list, as I mentioned, that you don't want to do. So there's nothing wrong with that. I can't say that I have yet, really narrowed down what I want to do, but I'm trying all I can. And, my internships and my research experience and all that have definitely helped me.
Yeah, you have so many experiences. I can clearly see why you love this field so much. And I think with all these things in your hat, you can definitely decide where to go because you have had so much experience. And you also mentioned some great advice to people wanting to go into the STEM field. So, is there anything else you would like to say about that?
I've probably mentioned most of the main ones. The whole don't be afraid to choose a new career path, even if it's something vastly different. So, if you just get to a point, even if you have a well-built, career, kind of like a path where you're doing something, if it doesn't make you happy anymore, or there's something else that makes you more happy or excites you more, or, makes you just want to get out of bed more in the morning, you should absolutely do that. And, I guess the other advices are the other ones that I mentioned previously. So, advocate for other women in STEM, advocate for yourself, stand up if you're in a situation like that. Don't be afraid to do things that you've never seen other people do. If I would have waited to have a role model or to see someone who does even, anything just like a tiny bit kind of like what I'm doing, then I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have had all of these amazing opportunities and all of this amazing education and just in general an amazing career that I'm so grateful for at such a young age, if I haven't had just, thought to myself, I'm going to do this, so I'm going to go and do it. Because even if you don't end up being able to do some of the things you set out to do, I often talk about this. I failed a lot of exams. I talk very fluently in English right now. That wasn't always the case. I failed several language exams. I failed at a lot of things in my life, and I failed at, about 1,000, if not 10,000 more times at things than I have succeeded. I've never won a competition until, it was a research competition and I was about 18, 19. So, you shouldn't be discouraged just because you feel like your failure. It's not just the thing that gets you closer to success, but your failure teaches you a lot more about you, your career, your future, and just even what, life is than your success ever will. There's a reason that, obviously the day I was accepted to college, it was like the movies, I was running around the house holding my phone. It's not as glorified if you're an international student, you're on a website, because your status has been changed. And, I was literally running to my mom and my dad being like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And probably people thought the next day on the bus on my way to school that I was a lunatic because you could not stop me from smiling. I was just kind of looking straight ahead, smiling like an idiot. And I'll never forget that, but I'll never forget the experiences I've had after failing. And I don't mean, obviously, you're going to get sad. You're going to be discouraged. You're going to have days where you doubt yourself. And obviously, I'm not saying those are amazing memories, but I like to think about what always happened after them, how I was never discouraged for a long time. How, after the longest time I've probably taken up being disappointed at myself or sad at myself for failure was maybe a day. And, I've always, the things that I've done and the things that I've learned immediately after those experiences have always meant so much more, and they've shaped me a lot more. Which obviously I'm not saying it's great. If you fail all the time, it's not going to feel great, but it will definitely help you a lot more in the long run, especially if you fail a lot when you're young. I like to think that it helps you become, a more well-formed adult, and you understand things a lot more. So it's not about just, not being afraid to fail. It's about learning how to learn from those situations. It's about realizing how you reacted, how you can do things differently, or how you can do them the same, because sometimes, it's just up to luck. You were either lucky or you were unlucky. And, you often have to recognize that. You're just human, you're growing, you're trying, and, setting out to do better and to be a better person than you were yesterday is the only thing that matters. So I think that's kind of my biggest advice and all of that.
Yeah, that's really some awesome advice. I would definitely keep that in mind. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for sharing your views, Eszti. And I'm so glad to know that there's one inspirational person that's representing women in STEM. And anyone watching this will have someone to look up to in aerospace engineering if they want to go in that field. I had such a great time interacting with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was happy I got to be here. I love talking about all of this. You can probably tell you've been looking at my crazy smiling face for almost an hour now. I love talking about this. I talk a lot about this. It's really important. So if any of you listening are interested in more, I do run a blog where I talk about all of my advice. So, if you want to see somebody doing something that, maybe if it's not even for you, just somebody doing something that they've never seen anybody do and feel a lot as they do it, you should go and check it out. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, I definitely love having people that are very passionate about what they're doing and talk to my audience and me about your field especially. So thank you so much. And to let all of you know, this podcast is now available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, and RadioPublic. Make sure you subscribe to all listening platforms and stay tuned for more. Thank you so much, Eszti.
Yeah, thank you.